The fundamental historical solution, Isratine, a single state for Jews and Palestinians. Prerequisites, the return of Palestinian refugees and displaced persons wherever they are located if that is their so wish. It is not admissible that Jews who are not originally inhabitants of Palestine and whose ancestors were not originally inhabitants of the country can be brought in from abroad, while Palestinians who fled Palestine as refugees and displaced persons only a short time ago, following the 1948 war, are not accorded the same right. The Jews maintain that they did not expel the Palestinians. They say that the Palestinians believed the propaganda claims and fled their homes. It is sufficient to note that one of the most famous zealots, Samuel Katz, a member of the First Knesset and leader of the Herut movement and the Etzel National Military Organization, cited the words of Glub Pasha, quote, "The Arab citizens were seized with terror and fled their villages without being exposed to any threat during the war." Katz suggests that this is how the lie arose that the Jews forcibly expelled the Arabs from their villages. He writes, quote, "Correspondents who covered the 1948 war, most of whom were hostile to the Jews, spoke of the Arabs fleeing, but they did not say that their flight was forced. They did not even insinuate that." That writer thus admits that an unusual phenomenon took place, namely that the inhabitants fled their homes. He also admits that it took place on a large scale. He further acknowledges that it was a mass flight of farmers who are traditionally strongly attached to their land. He also states that, quote, "The men fled without defending their homes. This large-scale collective mass flight of these Palestinians requires a logical explanation." He also cites the words of the Times correspondent in Amman, who wrote that Syria, Lebanon, East Jordan, and Iraq were filled by those fleeing Israel and expressed surprise at how they fled and why they did not remain or resist. Katz also quotes Emel al-Guri, secretary to the Supreme Arab Authority, who addressed the Political Committee of the United Nations on 17th of November 1960 in the following words, quote, "It was the Zionist acts of terror accompanied by mass killings that caused the mass exodus of the Arabs from Palestine. The propagation of these lies could have been nipped in the bud." The purpose of those extensive quotes is to emphasize two things. The first is to acknowledge that a mass exodus did take place. The second is to make clear that the reasons for the exodus lay in the propagation of frightening and false rumors about massacres that never in fact took place, in particular the infamous events reported to have occurred in the village of Deir Yassin. These quotes, testimonies, and the evidence they contain are but a few of a vast body of knowledge about the subject. They are included in this White Book, with the purpose of enabling us to benefit from them in our quest for a definitive solution. The testimonies of Zionist leaders, academics, and neutral observers serve to establish the following. First, that Palestinians inhabited this land and that they owned farms and homes there until 1948 and 1967. Secondly, that they left this land in 1948, leaving their farms and homes for fear of massacres, irrespective of whether these massacres actually happened or not. Thirdly, that prominent leaders and academics in the Zionist movement, including individuals who participated in the 1948 conflict, testify that the Jews did not expel the Palestinians from Palestine, not from their farms nor from their homes. In fact, the Palestinians believed the terrible rumors circulating and, terrified, left Palestine. Fourthly, that those who left formed a large group, that the exodus was on a significant scale. This is positive. It will assist us in solving the problem. The Jews, therefore, do not hate the Palestinians. They do not want to expel the Palestinians from their land, Palestine. They did not decide to massacre them, as the rumors suggest. Even the massacre at Deir Yassin did not take place. In fact, it was the non-Palestinian Arabs who attacked Palestine and declared war on the Jews. To find a solution to the problem, let us permit ourselves to believe all of the above and go back to square one, the point of origin, namely the return of Palestinians who left Palestine between 1948 and 1967. The Jews stressed that they did not expel the Palestinians. They fled for the reasons outlined above. This, logically, means that not even the Jews who have occupied their land can object to Palestinians remaining there. This is the key to solving the problem, namely the return of Palestinian refugees to Palestine. This measure would have the effect of putting everything back in its proper place. It would be an implementation of the United Nations resolution issued on the 11th of December, 1948. That resolution calls in paragraph 11 for the return of refugees. There can be no legitimate basis or legal right to any objection to that at all. In order to solve the problem, let us keep the lessons of history in mind, as we have seen the Old Testament and the history of the area record that Palestine saw successive transfer of numerous tribes and peoples. It was the object of a struggle for the whole of the land, not any one part. The Palestinians were the original inhabitants. The name Palestine derives from the Philistines, and the Jews and the Zionist movement called the land Palestine up to 1948. And as we identified earlier in this work, every Zionist movement, bank, or Jewish institution bore the name Palestine, a practice which, by their own testimony, continued until 1948. As we have stated before, and as the history of the region makes clear, no one, therefore, has the right to claim for themselves the whole of Palestine, or indeed the right to grant part of Palestine to someone else. Given this state of affairs, it would simply be unfeasible and impractical to partition Palestine into two states. Under partition, there would not be a state called Israel, nor would there be a state called Palestine. Those who call for the partition of Palestine into two states are thus either ignorant of the nature of the region and of its demography, or they want to rid themselves of the problem and put it in the hands of the Jews and the Palestinians.